Hey, 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 come on in, take a load off, because today I will be paging through and reviewing the brand new core rulebook for second edition Pathfinder from Paizo Inc. So pull up a chair, relax, and let's get down to it. Howdy, 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 gang. Yes, I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. I also happen to be the Grand Poobah of thegaminggang.com, as well as the host of the live stream, which airs Mondays through Fridays right here on YouTube, The Daily Dope. So, as I mentioned in the open, I'm going to page through and review the new core rulebook for second edition Pathfinder. And I have to be honest, I am not necessarily extremely well versed in first edition Pathfinder. So the way I'm going to approach this is more from a viewpoint of somebody with 40 years of experience with role playing games, both as a game master and a player, as opposed to somebody who knows every intricate detail mechanically of first edition Pathfinder. So I'm going to talk about what I like about the new system, what might have left me scratching my head a little bit, and also discuss who I think this new second edition Pathfinder really is tailored for. Do want to also mention that unfortunately I still have this con crud that is left over from my trip out to San Diego covering Comic-Con. It's affecting my sinuses. It's mainly out of my sinuses now, but it's in my chest. So I know I am going to kind of be hacking and coughing from time to time through this, so my apologies right up front. There's not much I can do about it at the moment. Also, this is being shot a couple of days before this video is being posted because release date for the new edition of Pathfinder and many of the new products is August 1st. Everything's under embargo as far as reviewers until August 1st. So I did shoot this a couple of days in advance because on August 1st, I'll be in Indianapolis covering Gen Con. All right, so Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the core rule book is, as I mentioned, from Paizo Inc. It's written by Logan Bonner, Jason Bullman, Stephen Radney McFarlane, and Mark Seifter. Hopefully I've pronounced those names correctly. The 630-page hardcover does carry an MSRP of $59.99. There is a deluxe edition of the hardcover that is available as well. It does carry an MSRP of $79.99. So let's move on over to the other camera because I've got the core rulebook here. This is a mighty big tome, as you can see. As I said, it's 630 pages. And it is jam-packed with role-playing game goodness. If you happen to live under a rock, let me point out that Pathfinder is a fantasy role-playing game. It is more in the vein of high fantasy, lots of magic, lots of monsters. It is not a kind of swords and sorcery, Conan the Barbarian sort of genre of role-playing. This is pretty traditional Dungeons and Dragons-ish role-playing, which I'm a big fan, so we're all good there. So let's crack this on open and we're going to jump right on in. Because this book is so large, has such a high page count, I'm not going to page through each and every page because I'm sure you probably don't want to sit through 2 hours of me just paging through this book. So, do want to also mention that for the most part, I really do like the artwork in Pathfinder. There are some art styles that are utilized in Pathfinder that I remember from first edition. I'm seeing again here in second edition that I'm not overly keen on. But for the most part, I like the fact that the artwork isn't as cartoonish or as anime inspired in some ways in this core rulebook as I had seen in first edition. Do want to mention, I do like this little sidebar here. It's going to tell you each of the sections. Of course, there is an index in the back, but I do like how this runs down the side. So it's like, oh, I need to get to equipment. Where's equipment at? There we go. Oh, where's it start? So you can kind of move through the book fairly quickly without have to be going to the index constantly. So we start off with an introduction, and we get our traditional: what is a role-playing game? Who are the players? What does the game master do? What do dice do? Don't be a jerk to other people at the table. Everybody's welcome in the hobby, and so on and so forth. Talking a little bit about how to play the game. One thing that is a little bit different with the second edition of Pathfinder is it's kind of broken into 3 core phases during the game. So there's a much more in-depth discussion of it further in the book, but we have exploration, encounters, and downtime. So, of course, encounters is more along the tactical aspect of combat. You do have social encounters as well, so that can break down into almost like a conflict resolution sort of thing. But that's more where you're tracking, seconds passing as opposed to minutes or hours. Exploration kind of telescopes out from that. That's more of, minutes passing. And then, of course, downtime is more along the lines of hours and days. So, talking about the rules and the rule elements here, we've got single actions, 2 actions, 3 actions, because there is an action economy which is involved in this, which I thought was pretty interesting, and we will get to that in just a bit. So we got our character creation, and you've got your character creation here. Your characters are actually going to be broken up into kind of like, they're made up of 3 elements. And we have ancestry, we've got backgrounds, and we have classes. So these pages here are just kind of breaking down the character sheet. The character sheet that's in this book I found to be kind of ugly. I wasn't a big fan of the character sheet style. I prefer just kind of a black and white with more white space as opposed to colored space. So like I said, I'm not overly keen on that character sheet. So of course we've got alignments once again, talking about sample characters. As far as the character creation, it is a bit more streamlined than in the past. There's less focus on kind of min-maxing, as we've seen in prior editions of Dungeons & Dragons, as well as first edition Pathfinder. One of the things that I had noticed is that a lot of the feats are not necessarily just a numeric bonus to a die roll. They have a lot more depth to them, and really make for interesting aspects to introduce into gameplay itself when you're creating the fiction. So we have our ancestry. Of course, normally ancestry in the past has been considered, races, cultures, heritage. We're seeing in more modern role-playing games, especially like fantasy games, we're getting away from the term race and more towards your ancestry, culture, what have you. One aspect that I thought was pretty cool is that as you level up your character, you will unlock new ancestry feats. So I like that a lot, because normally in most role-playing games, and if we're talking like old school, you have your ancestry and you get whatever bonuses, whatever penalties, and then that's it. That's all that really happens as far as the impact it has on the character. Whereas here in second edition Pathfinder, as your character continues to grow, they also unlock new ancestral feats. I thought that was very interesting, and I definitely dug it. Something else that's new is you can play a goblin. I don't believe that was the case in first edition Pathfinder, so you can now have goblin player characters. And of course, the Pathfinder Goblins have been very, very popular as far as Paizo has gone. A lot of the free role playing game day products over the years have dealt with the characters playing goblins. And I'll be the first to admit, my kind of kit bashed fantasy role playing game that I do with my nephew Cameron, his girlfriend Lexi, and their friends Daniel and another Cameron. I use the Pathfinder Goblins. So the goblins in that game are the Pathfinder Goblins because I find them so interesting, as opposed to just the traditional like Dungeons and Dragons goblins. We have the human heritage. Interestingly enough, if you're going to play a half elf or half orc, you actually start kind of with a human template and then go from there. So in fact, here we even see it says half orcs, half elves under the humans. So as I mentioned before, as we're flipping through here, the artwork is not as cartoon-ish as we've seen in first edition previously. Now there are a few pieces of art that I'm kind of like, oh, come on. I'm one of these people, I'm not into the, wow, okay, for an example like this. There is no way that this character is going to be able to lift that sword. That comes like straight out of Japanese role-playing games. That's more like, you know, Final Fantasy than anything else. So this piece of artwork, I'm like, eh. But they're fewer and further between in this core book than we've seen in past Pathfinder products. And once again, I mean, that's just me. It's just my thing, my pet peeve. I guess maybe don't want to say pet peeve. It's just more along the lines of I'm just not a big fan of that style. Then we start getting into classes. We've got a dozen classes we can choose from. We have the champion, which is effectively a paladin, but in second edition Pathfinder, they are known as the champion. So you got the alchemist, barbarian, bard, champion, cleric, druid, fighter, monk, ranger, rogue, sorcerer, and wizard. One thing I definitely also like is that you'll actually have like subcategories of each class. So every alchemist isn't going to be the same. Every cleric isn't going to be the same. So here we have a sample alchemist who is a chirurgeon. So it's like, okie doke. So then we also have the feats here as well for the classes. So as I mentioned before, your character is really made up of 3 different sections: the ancestry, the background, and then the classes. Now the background will add some new wrinkles to the character as well, but with the backgrounds you will not see additional feats, additional skills made available. See, once again, that's kind of, it's like, there's no way you would not be able to lift that sword and battle for more than like a couple of swings with a sword that size. It's, to me, that's just ridiculous. But it's ridiculous, as my friend David would say. But there are loads and loads of different feats. There are loads and loads of different kind of loadouts for you to create the kind of character that you want to play in Pathfinder. For an example, you got the Animal Rager is kind of an archetype of the barbarian. The Fury. So we've got the Bard, just kind of flipping on through here. There's a lot going on with character creation, but once again, the character creation is more focused toward creating the fiction as opposed to, oh, you get +2 to die rolls when you're doing X. So as an example here, we've got Soothing Ballad. You soothe your allies' wounds with the power of your performance. You learn the Soothing Ballad composition spell. Increase the number of focus points in your focus pool by 1. Nope, excuse me. So we got the Bard here, we got the champion. Interestingly enough, when I am a player in high fantasy role-playing games, I tend to play a paladin. So the champion would Be right up my alley here. So, as an example, we've got Divine Ally. Your devotion attracts the spirit of your deity's alignment. Once you choose an ally, your choice can't be changed. The following are divine allies: Blade Ally, Shield Ally, Steed Ally. Juggernaut. Your body's accustomed to physical hardship and resistant to ailments. Once again, it's not just simply, oh, you get +2 or +4, +1, or what have you. So we've got quite a lot of page count devoted to the characters. A great amount of the core rulebook is player facing. So we've got the various different character classes and the ancestries. We'll get into skills, we'll get into different feats, equipment, spells, kind of a background about Golarion. I think that's how the game world is pronounced, Golarion. So we got the fighter. One aspect of the second edition that I dig is that the fighter doesn't get ginked like in most role-playing games. Now, of course, I have not run high-level adventures with the second edition here, but the fighter tends to have a much bigger impact at higher levels than they usually do in most role-playing games, as far as I can tell. I'm a bully. That's me. I'm a bully. That's what I do. We got a duelist, archer. So we've got a monk. Moving on through all this stuff, but like I said, I really appreciate the fact that you can play different sorts of subcategories from these classes, which is not unusual. We see that a lot, but this is all within the core rulebook. So I appreciated the fact that we've got all these various options as far as creating your character with the core rulebook, as opposed to, well, here's 12 classes, boom, that's what you're going to play. You're going to play with those. As far as the sorcerer and the wizard, there are, between the two of them, there's about 14 to 16 different types of sorcerers and wizards that you can play. So once again, I thought that was really, really interesting. And to me, it is Paizo going above and beyond what they needed to do. Because, let's be honest, most role-playing game core books would not give you all of these options available to you. Do want to mention, starting off at first level, the characters do have much higher survivability, because you will have hit points based on your ancestry and class, as opposed to simply a hit die. So as in, say, like old school D&D, your first level wizard, you're going to have a 1d4 hit die. Here, you're going to have more than those hit points. Now we get into skills. And when we start getting into skills and feats, combat, things like that, one new aspect that I thought was pretty cool is the fact that a 1, of course, is a critical failure. A 20 is a critical success. Now, on top of the 1 and the 20, you can also have a critical success if your roll plus your bonuses is 10 points higher than the difficulty number that you're overcoming, and you have a critical failure if it's 10 points less. Now, all of these skills you're going to see actually shows critical success, critical failure. This is aimed more kind of towards the game master to give them a little more to chew over as far as what happens with a critical success or critical failure. One thing that I'm always famous for in when I'm running fantasy role-playing games is, especially in combat, a critical failure doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, you dropped your weapon, or, oh, you hit somebody else, you hit somebody who's part of your party. I would do stuff where it's like, okay, well, you actually hit that orc, but your axe is actually wedged into their shoulder, and they stumble off, taking your axe with them. So I throw weird stuff, right now, losing your feet, or you get in the way of somebody else and they don't get their chance to attack. So we've got the different feats. We have feats that are available based on the attribute. We have feats that are available that are general feats. And of course, we also have the feats that are available due to ancestry or classes. As we flip on through here, and it's funny because I said we're not going to look at every single page, but kind of doing it, but I'm kind of zipping through a little quicker than, we're not staring at every single page. One of the things that I like about this is, yes, there's artwork, and I like artwork in my rule books, in my adventure supplements and things like that. I know some people have claimed that, oh, they don't like artwork in their books. They don't want any artwork. To me, that's kind of silly because artwork tends to help kind of get my juices flowing, gives me ideas for things. And one thing that I appreciate is this is not overflowing with artwork. This is not where every single page we turn has a piece of artwork or something that's been recycled. Now, speaking of recycled, I do believe that some of this artwork has been utilized in previous Paizo products. I could be wrong. And I do know that they like to have these like core characters. So for an example, this is, I want to say, I thought that's the cleric. I think that's the cleric character that they tend to utilize. So it could be new artwork, but for some strange reason, I thought it looked like some of this artwork was coming from other products that I'd seen before. Now I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. So we're talking about various different pieces of equipment. One thing I would have liked to have seen is images of the weapons as well as the armor. We get a few images of different things, but I love, we got just a few here. I love books that'll show me like each of the weapons. Yes, I know it's more artwork. It's, adding probably a few pages to the page count. But to me, I love that. Now, granted, I happen to know the difference between a flail and a morning star and a mace. But somebody just starting out playing, maybe this is their first role-playing game they've ever encountered, they aren't going to know. So I always like to have images of the different weapons and armor and such. And not a huge deal, but I just wanted to point that out. Also want to mention, shields are very, very important, and I guess I will kind of talk about that more when we get into actually playing the game and the action economy. But we get into spells. There are loads and loads of spells in here. So we've got the different magical schools and traditions, talking about spell slots once again. So as far as the spell slots, pretty traditional as far as how those are utilized. Casting spells, certain spells are going to take longer to cast. Once again, that's going to utilize that action economy. So you can have up to 3 actions during your round, your turn, whatever you want to consider that. And depending on what you're trying to do is going to determine, or what your action is going to determine how many actions you have to spend. So this is just giving a breakdown of all the various different spells. So we've got arcane spells, we've got divine spells, we've got occult spells, we've got primal spells, and then we go into our spell descriptions. Now, as I mentioned, there are a lot of spells. See, look at this, flipping all the way through all this. And I have to say, that's cool. I like having more spells rather than fewer spells. Just how I am. So we have, how many pages of spells do we have? About 100? A little more than 100? A little more than 100 pages of spells. No, a little less. But we have all the information about spell casting and things like that. So 316 to 415. So we got 99 pages of spells. Then we get into the Age of Lost Omens. Now we're going to kind of get into a bit of the background of the world of Golarion and the different areas. This is pretty short. We get just a few paragraphs about some important areas of the world. But at least we are getting a little bit of some information fleshed out, talking about the different cultures as well. Some of the creatures you'll encounter, different factions, different religions. And of course, we know Paizo has plenty of products on the horizon that are going to go into a lot more detail about the setting. In fact, I think one of the first products coming out may actually be out August 1st, is kind of the setting book. I did not receive that for review. I received the core rulebook and the bestiary. So I would be very interested in checking that out. I believe it's a soft cover. I think it's a soft cover that's coming out. So we get into playing the game. And from what I have seen, second edition is much more streamlined than first edition Pathfinder was. I know people kind of joke around and they call first edition Pathfinder Math Finder because of all the bonuses, penalties, all these things that you're adding and subtracting all the time. You don't have as much of that anymore. The game is, I love here it says making choices, because the way I've gotten second edition from reading it is that the game is really more about making important choices around the game table, and choices that really help drive the fiction of the story. Now, I'm not saying that the players are sitting there and it's like we're all getting together and everybody's got an equal hand in creating the story. I'm not saying that. We're not talking, this is playing in a sandbox. But I do like the fact that we've got a lot of things going on in the system itself where it's not just throwing numbers on top of numbers. Not that I mind math. I have no issue with math. It's just one of the things that I wasn't overly keen about first edition was that it was just all these modifiers and all these other things, and it was sort of like, really? That said, and let me grab a quick sip again. There is more tactical aspects to second edition Pathfinder than you'll find in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I like 5th edition. I'm one of these people, I don't really have a dog in the fight. That's what I like to always tell people. I don't have a dog in the fight. I am not like locked into, oh, I gotta play this game and only this game and that's it and everything else is crap. I'm not one of those people. But one of the aspects of Dungeons and Dragons, at least 5th edition D&D, that I think could use more work is combat. Combat just feels kind of really stagnant. The players don't seem to have a whole lot of options unless you're sitting there and you're creating a fiction behind it. You know, you're describing what you're doing to attack or what you're doing to try to avoid taking damage, things like that. Another aspect of 5th edition that I'm not overly keen on is you can keep getting knocked down to 0 hit points. You get healed, you pop back up. Every time you get knocked down, there's really no consequence to it. So you can constantly just be like whack-a-mole, basically. Here in combat, if you drop to, well, if it's like this goblin's like all skewered with arrows here. Here you'll drop to 0 hit points and you move to like dying. So you're like dying level 1. And of course you're going to make a recovery check. If you don't pass that recovery check, then you move to dying 2. And then if you don't make that recovery check, you may go to dying 3. Now you're really on death's door. And if you miss your recovery check, then that's it. Your character's dead. But if you're healed, then you're wounded, you're back on your feet, but you're wounded, and if you get knocked down to 0 once again, now you actually will start off at dying 2, and take it from there. So the more times you're reduced to 0 hit points in a battle, you're brought back, you're healed, what have you, but you're knocked down to 0 hit points again, and there are no negative hit points in this. You move ever closer to taking a permanent dirt nap, and that I do like that. So if you notice as we go through here, and once again, as far as action resolution with your skills, things like that, it's D20. You're rolling D20s. You'll have bonuses, and of course, you're looking to overcome a difficulty number. As I had mentioned before, you're going to see more critical failures and more critical successes. So I find that helps to move the combat along a little bit quicker. And I also like the fact that in combat, characters can make more than one attack. So as I mentioned before, we have this action economy. Let me flip back because I think we showed a table here, didn't we? Just a few pages back here. Here we go. The action icon keys: single action, 2 action, 3 action. You've got reactions and free actions. So many of your feats are going to show if, oh, well, this is a reaction, or maybe it takes so many points from the action economy to do. So the thing that I like is that attacking, you can attack multiple times. Each successive attack, you are going to have a lower chance of succeeding and a higher chance of failing, which also means you have a higher chance of a critical failure. So here we have different actions here: aid, crawl, drop prone, release, seek, stride, strike, and it's showing us, okay, so how many actions, what kind of, that's a reaction there, right? That's a single action. This is 2 actions. So this is when you're in encounter mode, because remember I mentioned that now the game kind of looks at things through 3 different modes. Encounter mode, which is when you're telescoping in. So now it's like, a few seconds of time pass between these actions taking place. Then you kind of telescope out and you're in exploration mode. Then you can telescope further out and you're in downtime mode. So here we start talking about different movement, terrain, things like that. This is where we start getting into, there's a little more tactical nuance to combat in 2nd edition Pathfinder than there is in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And I can understand why 5th edition went the direction it went in, because a lot of people felt that 4th edition was just way too combat heavy. So now we talk about exploration mode. Just a couple of pages here. Talk about downtime mode. There's some cool, interesting stuff in the downtime mode as far as what characters can try to do. So as you can see, let me go back here. Playing the game. Because when you're looking at 630 pages, you're like, wow, man, there must be tons and tons of rules I'm going to have to memorize. Goes from 443 to 481. So not even 40 pages devoted to the actual core mechanics of the game, talking about skill checks, feats, combat, and so forth. Then we get into a section about game mastering. There's some interesting ideas in here. I would have liked to have seen a bit more page count devoted to game mastering itself. Here's one of the things I thought was kind of interesting too. We got the modes of play, so it's kind of talking about, okay, so how does the game master actually handle encounters, and then how does the game master handle exploration? And then we've got the downtime as well, talking about the different things that people can do in downtime. One thing like old school D&D, like a downtime, was like nothing happened, right? It's you're just flash forwarding. It's like, a jump cut in a movie. Whereas in more modern role playing games, you tend to kind of role play out some of the downtime between your adventuring and your dungeon delving and things like that. Then we get into difficulty classes. Monsters and challenges are a little bit different than I recall first edition Pathfinder. Whereas instead of having like challenge ratings, now you just have straight out levels, and it's recommended that you kind of take the level of your party, and either you can go you look at like 4 levels above, 4 levels below, and that's pretty much kind of the ballpark you want your challenges, your monsters to fall into. I like that fact because I am not big on everything needs to be balanced. I know that's been a real big thing with a lot of role-playing games, especially like Dungeons and Dragons, where it's like, well, we want to make sure that it's not like a total party kill and the players feel like they're challenged, but that it's not like that they run across something that they just can't possibly handle. And I come from old school. I am a old school Renaissance sort of person, so the real world wouldn't treat these characters that way. It wouldn't be like, oh well, I'm a big baddie, and here come these characters, these heroes and that, but they're kind of pissants, so I guess I better not bother them because they're beneath me. No, absolutely not. Big baddie would be out there like, okay, well, you're cannon fodder. Come on, bring it on. So we're talking about hazards with traps. Get a few examples of different traps as well. Then we get into crafting and treasures. Then we got some charts of various different treasure tables with different magical items. Once again, we run into an area here where we really don't see images of a lot of these things, which is kind of unfortunate. I always like to see some images of some of the stranger or more unique magical items. We do get a few. We get a few images, but not a lot, not a ton. I am a big fan of magic items that just do something really, really unique, where they have a bonus as well as kind of a penalty to utilizing them. Like one of my favorite magic items I've ever used in a game was a longsword that would tell you when someone was lying. But the flip side to that was, if you were wearing the longsword, you could not yourself tell a lie or any sort of mistruth or even try to fudge something. So I always got a kick out. That was one of my favorite magic items I tossed out at some players one time, and led to some pretty interesting fiction after that. Right, so this is how we're going to actually basically finish up this book here, is with the crafting and the various different treasures. There's quite a lot in here. All right. Then we're going to get to the appendix. We're going to talk, we got the different conditions. There seem to be fewer conditions than I recall from first edition. There are still quite a few, but I thought there were way more than this when I read the first edition. But still, I mean, lots to choose from, and pretty much spells everything out. Then we got what I find to be a pretty ugly character sheet. I know some people will be like, oh yeah, I dig that. Looking at the character sheet, you'd be like, oh wow, man, this must be like super crunchy rule wise. And really, second edition is not. There is some crunch. There's more crunch than there is in 5th edition D&D, but not as much crunch as I seem to recall from 1st edition Pathfinder. So that's it. So we get into kind of a glossary, then we get to an ad for, yeah, there we go, Lost Omens World Guide. That's the, Oh, it's a hardcover. I thought it was going to be a soft cover. So that's kind of the world guide to Galarian. And then we've got an ad for the bestiary. Whereas some people say bestiary, but I used to call it a bestiary, and people would comment on my videos saying, oh, you're not pronouncing it right, man. It's bestiary. So that is the Pathfinder Core Rulebook. Paged through it as quickly as kind of possible. Talked about it. So what are my thoughts and my review score? So as I mentioned before, I'm not married to the first edition Pathfinder. Just like I'm not married to the fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons or anything else. I will point out I am married to Call of Cthulhu, but I I run other role playing games too. So I found I was very pleasantly surprised. I was really pleasantly surprised at the second edition of Pathfinder because I got to be honest, I thought we were going to see just a lot of crunch again, just like tons and tons of crunch, and just kind of a refined math finder, as people like to joke around. That's not the case. Also, this is not where it was like, well, let's take stuff from first edition and we're just going to tweak it a little bit, and that's now second edition. The vibe I got from the core rulebook is this was kind of put together by scratch. And there are a lot of things from first edition that did not carry over to second edition. Whereas the second edition Pathfinder shares a lot in common with Starfinder as opposed to first edition Pathfinder. And to me, that's a good thing. I find that there's a lot devoted to the players customizing their characters so that they're playing the sort of characters they want to play. There are a lot of different options for the players to be able to tweak whatever class they choose to make it very unique. So no two clerics are going to be the same. No two wizards are going to be the same. No two fighters should be the same. And I like that. I like that a lot. I also like the fact that the feats, even the skills to a certain extent, are not just, oh, well, this is cut and dried. Boom, this is a +2. This is a +1 to your die rolls. Do this, get a +1 on this, but you get a -1 on something else. Those kind of things. No, that it's basically telling you, okay, so this is what this does. This is what this feat does. This is the special ability that you get, and it's within the fiction as opposed to just simply a die roll modifier. Really like that as well. I think for people who enjoy just like kind of like bare bones role-playing game systems, this is going to be way too much crunch. I'll tell you that right now. Even though it is streamlined from first edition, there is still quite a bit of math going on. Not like before, but there is still some math cooking. And there's a lot going on under the surface. So for fans out there of things like, like the Black Hack or Powered by the Apocalypse, Dungeon World, things like that, this is probably not going to be up their alley, I guess I'll say. Let me grab another sip here because I'm about ready to start hacking and coughing again, so hold on. What are some of the other things I liked? Like the fact that we got a lot of spells. I like the fact that combat has kind of been, I don't want to say, maybe not necessarily sped up, but combat just seems to be more robust as opposed to, oh, swing, miss. Okay, next. Who's next? Okay, I'm waiting. Wait till it's my turn again. Also feels like there's more things for all of the player characters to do. No character is ever like completely, oh, well, Joe Bob's fighter can never do that because his intelligence is like so low. Not so much of that. Every character has not only they're going to have their own specific thing that they excel at, there are going to be other things that they do well as also. So I didn't find as much like penalization going on with the different characters as well. So like, like older games, it'd be like, well, they're they're fantastic as far as their wisdom and their intelligence, but everything else is garbage. So they're useless as far as open. They can't even walk half a mile without falling over their own feet and things like that. Not the case here. Like I said, love the fact that there's loads and loads of spells. I like the fact that there's some wiggle room as far as game masters creating their own encounters. As far as it's not like, oh gosh, don't make things too easy or too difficult. It's got to be right in that challenge rating level. So I like that as well. I will get into this more with the bestiary than in the core book, but monsters are a bit different now. And I do like the fact that each of the monsters has something unique to them. And it's also when you're facing off against like a big baddie, it's going to feel like your players are facing off against a tremendously difficult foe, as opposed to, oh, well, we got to knock down so many meat points and hopefully we stay out of the range of their special attack. So all in all, I think Pathfinder, for those out there who like 5th edition, but find that maybe there's a little too much hand waving, maybe you don't get into enough detail as far as the character customization, as well as like tactics and combat and things like that. I think this is perfect for them. I think for people who kind of discounted 1st edition Pathfinder, a little bit like me, a little bit. I like the adventure paths and stuff like that. I just found the core system, the mechanics, to be just a little more crunched than I personally like at this point in my life. I think you're going to want to give the 2nd edition a very, very serious look. Even if you have really no, I don't want to say desire, but you don't have a burning desire to run 2nd edition Pathfinder, there's some good stuff in here that you might want to pick up and crib for your own role-playing games. The people who I am unsure of how they're going to respond to this are actually the people who are really into 1st edition Pathfinder. And the reason I say that is because this is a lot different. Now, it might even be more different than I think it is, because it has been a while since I took a peek at the 1st edition rulebook for Pathfinder, but it seems as if there were no sacred cows when it came to the 2nd edition. It seems like the folks at Paizo sat down and said, hey, you know what? These are the things that people really like about our game. Maybe these are some things that people aren't so keen about it. What if we started kind of from scratch? And that is pretty much what you're getting with the Pathfinder 2nd edition core rulebook. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I gotta be honest, I really like this book. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I give the 2nd edition Pathfinder core rulebook a very, very solid 9.5 out of 10. Yeah. So there you have it. Anyway, as I like to always say, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, please visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. By now, you probably know the drill. Then again, maybe this is the first video you've ever watched on the Gaming Gang channel. I don't know. But get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I am Jeff McAleer. If you like the video, please give it a quick thumbs up. If you check out some of the videos on the Gaming Gang channel and you like them, by all means, please subscribe. And don't forget, ring that little bell, because not only will that tell you when a new video, such as this one, gets uploaded, it'll also tell you when the Daily Dope goes live, which is Mondays through Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. So I will be back shortly with my review of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Bestiary. So until next time, thanks for watching. If you're ready for some more fun and you'd like to check out the latest episode of the Daily Dope, my live Monday through Friday show that airs at 7 p.m. Central
right here on YouTube, click right here. And if you'd like to roll the dice and push your luck and see a randomly selected video from the channel, click right here. You pays your money, you takes your chances. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and thank you for watching.